Years later, when people ask me how I survived the thing my own blood had plotted, I would tell them the truth. But I always start with the moment everything changed. I was hiding in the backseat of my son's car with a chocolate cake under my arm, smiling like an idiot at the thought of his face. 20 minutes later, I walked out a different person. The woman who climbed into that sedan was still my son's mother. The woman who came out was someone who had been betrayed so thoroughly that survival no longer felt like a hope. It felt like a duty. If you listen closely, I want you to sit with me through each small, ordinary detail, because the way monster plans are built is always out of ordinary things. A joke at a dinner, a casual question about a stare, a look that lasts a second too long. Before I begin, if you're the kind of person who cares about family stories and the bitter lessons they teach, I'd be honored if you'd stick around until the end. I promise you'll understand why I did what I did, and why I had to be smarter than my own blood. My name is Lydia. I am 62. For most of my life, I was small in the world's eyes, but enormous in my son's, his comfort, his education, his laughter. I scrubbed floors and polished chrome and washed other people's dishes so my son, Javier, could sleep warm and finish his homework with the light on. I sold my wedding ring when he needed a computer. I worked days and nights. I nursed fevers and kissed scraped knees. I learned how to stretch a dollar like it held elastic threads. I did not have college for myself, but I had a stubborn, holy belief that my child would. I thought that belief, when returned, would be the soft, bright center of our family forever. I was wrong. That afternoon started like every other small, ordinary attempt at happiness I used to give myself. A simple surprise. I baked the chocolate cake because it was a cake Javier loved when he was 6 and would grin for with chocolate all over his face. I imagined him at the office, the same boy who once cheered when I made him a cupcake at graduation. The parking lot was small and quiet. His silver car sat tucked into a corner. I slipped into the unlocked back seat like a child playing hide-and-seek, my heart a poem of giddy nerves. The door opened. Footsteps passed by. Then 2 voices. One I expected, one that felt as cold as glass. The voice was Raquel's, poised, smooth, the kind of voice that had been trained to hide discomfort and command rooms. I knew her well enough by then to feel a chill when it slid into the air beside my son's. At first, I let myself believe she was a coworker or friend. Then I heard the words that turned my chest to stone. "Are you absolutely sure no one will suspect anything when it happens?" The syllables were careful, practiced. My son answered with the same cruel economy of planning they used over the next minutes. Every step mapped, every excuse rehearsed. "She'll have an accident," he said. "A slip on the stairs. No one will question it. The house will sell. We can have what we've been dreaming about." The air left me slow and rattling. I had been so proud of the man he became. Graduations, a job at a firm, a white shirt I bought with savings. And yet here he was discussing how to make my life end so they could have a different one. That the word accident could be dressed in legalese and sang like a lullaby made the betrayal worse. They were doing math with my life. They named figures, 200,000 for the home, another 100,000 in insurance, my savings ballooning in their conversation to become the stepping stones of a life they wanted but couldn't afford. The people who should have loved me most had turned me into currency, and the thought of it broke me the way winter breaks a brittle branch. I could have left then. I could have stepped out and told them that I heard everything, called the police, screamed at the top of my lungs. But something colder than fear wrapped my heart. The knowledge that I needed proof. A single whispered plan could be denied, explained as an evil joke, washed away with blame. I deserved, an answer that would stand in a court of law, or in the eyes of neighbors and friends. I waited 10 more minutes, every muscle shaking. When their footsteps faded, I crept out of the car and drove home like a woman moving underwater. That night sleep fled me. Terror and disbelief walked the room with long, slow steps. Who do you tell when your only child is plotting your murder? Who believes such a thing? The questions made me feel foolish and catastrophic. To tell you why this stabbed so deep, I have to tell you where we came from. Our house was one of those narrow, stubborn places with paint that had long ago surrendered to sun, and a yard that grew whatever it wanted. We had no savings when his father, Robert, died in a job accident. I was left with a home, a handful of debt, and a boy who looked at me like I was the only bright thing left in the world. I washed other people's porcelain and cleaned the offices of people who never noticed me. My fingers were rough for years, my back angled and bowed. But Javier, bright, eager, the child who always read ahead in class, deserved a shot. So I worked and saved, and yes, I sold the last glitter of my youth, the wedding ring, and bought him a computer. I missed parties and dresses and new things so he could have a new life. He became more than my dream. He graduated. He got a job. He married a woman named Raquel who wore elegance like armor. At first she was courteous, and later I realized her kindness was just a practice in politeness, a theater. There was a cold attentiveness in her that measured my house like a surveyor. She noticed the threadbare couch, the loose handrail, the sagging kitchen light. Her eyes skimmed things that mattered. They did not settle. I should have listened to that feeling. Mothers are tuned to small frays in our children's lives. But I hoped, as mothers do, that love would fill the shaping cracks. The subtle turns in the last few years made a grotesque kind of sense once I heard the plan. Questions about insurance, casual remarks about stairs, an odd interest in my savings. These had been seeds. Then there was my brother, Alvin, the man who could have been my safe harbor but who chose a different tide. Alvin and his wife Patricia had long nursed old resentments. They'd lived comfortably while I worked, and I'd never forgiven fortune for the ease it allowed them. But I never expected greed to be the word that moved them. The idea that a man who once laughed at my jokes could sketch a plan for my death felt like someone cutting the last rope that held me to my old self. The night I confronted Alvin in his living room, his face flickered with something I had not seen in years. No guilt, only a narrow anger that blamed me for the world's unfairness. The way they recited numbers, my house, my savings, my policy, made it clear that this was not the vague grumbling of families. This was calculation. After that, I began to watch them the way someone watches a fever. They move strangely, and you study their motion for answers. I parked near their apartment, followed from a distance when needed, learned the edges of their routine. The truth I uncovered was as ordinary as it was damning. Credit cards, debts, nights out they could not afford. Javier's salary, which once felt like abundance, dissolved against the lifestyle Raquel kept close. They were drowning in debts they would never surface from unless they found a ladder, and I, with a house and a life insurance policy, had become that ladder. Once you see betrayal from inside the belly of it, something changes in you. The person who had been the soft center of family gatherings hardened into a woman who planned in ways she never had before. Sleep became a currency I could not spend freely. Every knock on the door made my ears tense. If they wanted to murder me, I decided I would not simply wait to be the nameless statistic of a bad fall. I would turn the script on them. They had planned a death for me. I would stage a death for them to witness, and I would watch how their faces rearranged when confronted by the raw consequences of their greed. I told no one. To move against people you love is an ugly act, but so is murder plotted like a business meeting. I did the only thing I could think was truthful. I recruited someone I trusted more than anyone. My neighbor, Beatrice. She was 70, had been a nurse for decades, and the kind of person who could tell when a pulse was real and when a heartbeat was an act. She had seen death enough times to respect its borders. When I told her what I'd heard in the car, her hand closed over mine and she did not recoil. There are friends who blur kindness into convenience, and friends who become the kind of people you will let into your last choices. Beatrice was the latter. Plan sounds like a dignified word. What Beatrice and I prepared was uglier and more precise. We researched. We rehearsed. We learned the thickness of ambulance sirens, and how long it took for a paramedic's hands to check the wrist before pronouncing the obvious. We found a pathologist who would look the other way, a terrible favor, a corruption disguised as compassion, and we mapped out a time when Javier and Raquel would be predictably absent. We practiced the cadence of breath and the pallor of a heart that has been convinced to sleep. We chose a Sunday because their visits were usually to Raquel's parents. Predictable patterns are useful in a life like mine now. I felt like a thief in my own life, and I stole the only thing left to me, the right to see their faces when they believed the plan had worked. On the morning of the charade, I dressed carefully as if for a funeral I could not bear to attend. There is something strange about preparing for your own death. You find the dignity in small things. I put on a yellow dress I liked. If I was to be described in the papers, I wanted the color to be something alive, Beatrice watched my hands shake as she measured the medicines. There is a terror in knowing that a wrong dose ends the plan and begins a real fatality. We had to be precise. The idea of playing dead is not romantic. It is clinical and cold, and requires nerves made of something other than hope. When the paramedics arrived, I lay very still. I heard the practiced phrases they use, the quick assessments that could be the difference between life and death for someone else. I listened for the moment when a body's absence of pulse is recorded into official language, because legal language makes illusions become facts. I heard the words we needed them to say. We can't detect a pulse. It looks like a heart attack. The phrase likely, heart attack, folded me into the same room as living dead. People do, where your body is technically alive, but your identity is declared over. Then came the waiting, the part I had dreaded and the part I needed. I woke in Beatrice's basement some hours later, my mouth dry, my heart a slow foreign drum. The world felt wrong, like a book whose pages had been rearranged. We had done it. I had been declared dead. I had become an object to be weighed, to be mourned, to be inherited. Now I would watch the people who loved me, or thought they did, walk through the motions they had once rehearsed in a car. If you're still with me, please remember to like and subscribe. There are parts to this story that only make sense when you hear them in order, and it helps me keep telling them. I will tell you what happened the next day. The callers, the friends who cried, the look on my son's face when he thought the plan had succeeded. But I will not tell you the end yet. In the next part, I will reveal how the funeral unfolded, how the family performed grief, and the precise moment when their greed started to show like a bruise spreading under skin. For now, I will leave you with one small image. The cake I had brought untouched in my kitchen, a laugh frozen in sugar. The same hands that once carried cakes to my child now had to learn how to carry betrayal. And when they came to the house to pay their respects, I had a trick up my sleeve they could never have predicted. The morning after my death, the world moved on without me. The sun rose like it always does, spilling gold through my curtains as if nothing monumental had shifted. Yet for me, everything had, somewhere in the city, official papers already carried my name on their list of the newly deceased. Somewhere in the system, a clerk had typed a certificate declaring Lydia Morales no longer among the living. I sat in Beatrice's basement, wrapped in a borrowed quilt, listening to her kettle whistle and thinking, so this is what it feels like to haunt your own life. The first calls came before noon. Beatrice's landline, which almost never rang, shrilled with urgency. Old church friends, a neighbor from 2 houses down, even a woman I used to clean for 15 years ago. News travels fast when death is the headline. I could hear Beatrice's steady nurse's voice as she answered. Yes, she passed suddenly. Yes, it looked like a heart attack. Each confirmation carved deeper into my chest. People I had once hugged, laughed with, prayed beside were mourning me, and I was sitting in the dark sipping weak tea. It felt cruel, like watching people cry at a play they didn't know was staged. But cruelty had already been dealt to me first. I reminded myself of that every time guilt threatened to soften me. My son had counted the dollars my corpse might bring him. His wife had spoken of me as a problem to solve. My brother had joined in like a vulture at a feast. No, I told myself, this performance wasn't cruelty. It was justice with a veil. By evening, Javier and Raquel arrived at the house. I couldn't see them, but Beatrice had stationed her granddaughter with a small camera in her purse, pretending to be a visitor paying respects. I watched later when the footage came through, my breath caught in my throat. My son walked into my living room with shoulders hunched just so, the way he used to when he'd feign sorrow as a boy caught in a lie. He pressed his lips together, nodding solemnly at condolences. But his eyes? Oh, his eyes betrayed him. They darted quickly over the furniture, the pictures, the very walls, as if measuring what was his now. Raquel, always polished, dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. No redness bloomed in her skin, no tremor in her voice. She was such a strong woman, she said. And the words rang hollow, like coins tossed in an empty jar. Neighbors nodded politely, unaware that the performance was less about loss and more about gain. And when the casserole dishes arrived, and when kind arms wrapped around them, my son and his wife accepted the sympathy like actors bowing at the end of a scene. I had to pause the video halfway through, bile rising in my throat. The funeral was scheduled 2 days later. Beatrice handled the arrangements, with help from a funeral director she trusted. To the world, I was in a closed casket due to medical reasons. To the world, I was gone. To me, it was the strangest out-of-body experience, choosing hymns I'd never hear sung, approving flowers I'd never smell. I kept thinking of the chocolate cake still sitting in my kitchen, untouched, the last innocent gesture before my world cracked. When the day arrived, Beatrice smuggled me into the church basement through a side door before dawn. I sat in the shadows of the old choir room, my heart pounding in my ears. From above, I could hear the organ warm up, the low hum of voices gathering, the scrape of shoes on tile. And then, clear as bells, I heard my son's voice, warm, careful, grieving me. He spoke of my sacrifices, my hard work, how I always put family first. People sniffled. A woman sobbed into her handkerchief. Raquel's voice followed, softer, with a catch in her throat at all the right places. "She was like a mother to me," she said, her words dripping with irony so bitter I nearly laughed. A mother to her? A mother to the woman who conspired to shove me down my own staircase? The church nodded, consoled, convinced. But grief is a costume that fits poorly on the greedy. When the service ended, when the crowd trickled out to their cars, I caught sight of something that froze me solid. Through a sliver of curtain upstairs, I saw Javier standing alone near the altar, his face slack, his lips curling into something almost like relief. He exhaled long, like a man dropping a heavy burden. And then Raquel joined him, squeezing his hand. Their eyes didn't glisten with sorrow. They glimmered with calculation. I could almost read the words in their silence. It's done. We're free now. That night, Beatrice brought me the footage again, taken discreetly by her granddaughter. Together we watched as Raquel in the parking lot whispered sharply, "It went perfectly. No one suspects a thing." Javier nodded, jaw tight, glancing around before saying, "Soon we can list the house." My house. My blood boiled. I knew then that this wasn't only about catching them. It was about teaching them what real grief feels like. They had rehearsed joy at my imagined death. Now I would rehearse justice at their real exposure. But here's the problem when you fake your own death. You become invisible, yes, but you also become powerless. Legally, I was gone. Any sudden reappearance without a plan would risk everything being dismissed as paranoia or hysteria. I couldn't just march into the police station and say, "Surprise, I'm alive, arrest my son." They would call me unstable or worse. No. If I wanted this to end, I needed more than words. I needed undeniable proof. That's when Beatrice leaned across the table, her eyes steady. "Then we give them rope," she said, "and watch them hang themselves with it." We began laying new groundwork. My son believed I was dead. That meant he and Raquel would begin moving, quickly, to liquidate what they thought was theirs. We only had to follow the trail. Property transfers leave paper. Insurance claims leave signatures. Greedy people leave fingerprints and ink, even when they think no one is watching. I would be watching. Every step. Still, I couldn't shake the ache. As much as I hardened myself against them, at night, when the basement grew too quiet, my mind betrayed me. I thought of Javier's first birthday, his first day of school, the way he used to fall asleep curled against me when thunder rattled the windows. How could that boy, the one I fed and clothed and loved with everything I had, grow into a man who plotted my death? Betrayal has layers, and the deepest cut is not from the knife, but from the face that holds it. 2 days after the funeral, Raquel made the first move. She called the insurance company. We had a recorder set on the line, thanks to Beatrice's friend at the phone company. I sat there, shaking as Raquel's voice slid into false grief. "Yes, I'm calling about my mother-in-law's life insurance policy. She passed suddenly, and we want to begin the claims process." Her tone dipped into sorrow only when she said passed. The rest was brisk, efficient. Business. The agent on the other end asked the usual questions. Cause of death, date, relationship. Raquel answered smoothly. Too smoothly. Javier's voice joined, providing confirmation, even a choked sniffle at one point. They were acting and badly, but the machine didn't know the difference. It logged their words, their intent, their signatures soon to follow. We had them. Not enough yet for the law to swallow whole, but enough to bait the hook deeper. That evening, I pressed record on the tape again, my hands trembling, and whispered into the darkness of the basement. Javier, if you ever hear this one day, know that the mother you tried to bury is the same mother who taught you to walk, and she's still walking. And walk I did, back into a plan sharper than any knife. Because what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that their downfall was only just beginning. The days after the funeral felt like walking through glass. Every step cut me, but I kept walking anyway. From Beatrice's basement, I listened to the world I was supposed to have left behind. The neighbors organizing casseroles, the church sending cards, the distant hum of life carrying on without Lydia Morales. To them, I was gone. To me, I was a shadow, waiting for the right light to cast myself back into view. Raquel wasted no time. Within a week of the funeral, she and Javier had already started filing paperwork. They were confident now, bold even. Their phone calls, carefully recorded by our hidden devices, were full of businesslike tones, sprinkled with performative sighs. We're still grieving, Raquel told the insurance adjuster, though her voice carried more impatience than sorrow. Javier added, It's been so hard for the family, but we need to settle her affairs quickly. Settle my affairs. Such cold words for the woman who once held his fevered body against her chest. Beatrice sat with me as we listened, her jaw tightening. They're digging their own grave, she muttered. And she was right, but I knew we needed more than just recordings. Greed leaves a trail, yes, but the law requires footprints clear enough to press into stone. We had to let them press harder. So we waited. The first tangible move came when Javier stepped into the bank. Beatrice's grandson, a quiet college boy with a job as a teller, spotted him. Javier had my death certificate in hand, sliding it across the counter with that same careful sadness he'd displayed at the funeral. My mother passed, he said. We need access to her accounts. The boy told us later how Javier's eyes flicked around nervously, his fingers tapping too fast on the counter. Still, policy was policy. The request went through. I should have felt rage. Instead, I felt something colder, emptier, like standing at the bottom of a well and hearing your own echo. That account wasn't just money. It was years of aching hands, late nights, missed meals, sacrifice layered upon sacrifice. Every dollar was a memory, and he signed for it as if signing for a delivery package. Raquel, meanwhile, turned her attention to the house. My house. She contacted a realtor, her voice honeyed with false grief. It's too painful to keep living in her space. We'd like to put it on the market right away. Too painful, she said, as if the walls they wanted to sell didn't still carry my fingerprints, my laughter, my prayers whispered late at night. The realtor, eager for commission, moved quickly. A for sale sign sprouted on my lawn within days. Beatrice drove me past it one evening. The windows rolled up. My body hunched low. When I saw that sign, it was like seeing my own tombstone planted in the earth. And still, I stayed hidden. Because here's the thing. Patience is the weapon no one suspects. They thought the story was already over. They thought I was buried, erased, converted into cash. What they didn't know was that every move they made, every signature, every whisper was being cataloged, documented, stored. Each piece another nail in the coffin they were building for themselves. One evening, as we reviewed the tapes, I caught something that made my skin prickle. Javier's voice low and tense. We need to be careful. If anyone finds out about those conversations we had before, everything could fall apart. Raquel hissed back. No one will. She's gone. Stop worrying. But Javier was right to worry, because I was very much alive. And those conversations weren't lost. They were safe on a little black recorder in Beatrice's drawer. It was around then that doubt began to gnaw at me. Late at night, lying awake on the cot in the basement, I asked myself, why not reveal myself now? March to the police with the recordings, the papers, the witnesses? But another voice inside me whispered, not yet. Let them show the full measure of their greed. Let the mask slip completely. And so, I waited for the biggest act of all. The insurance payout. It was Raquel who pushed hardest. She called daily, pressing the adjuster with a brittle sweetness that cracked under pressure. My husband and I are devastated. she repeated, her tone clipped. But this policy was meant to protect us. We need it released. The adjuster, wary, asked for additional proof, more documents, more patience. Raquel fumed. How much longer must we suffer? She snapped one day, not realizing her words were being recorded. Suffer? She was living in my house, spending my savings, preparing to pocket the last remnants of my life. And she dared to call it suffering. Beatrice and I exchanged looks over the tape recorder. It was time to prepare the next step. We couldn't simply wait for them to cash the check. We needed them to incriminate themselves in a way no jury could ignore. That meant baiting them into conversations about the plan, drawing out details they thought were buried with me, and who better to do it than someone they trusted, my brother Alvin. The thought curdled my stomach. Alvin had been part of this from the start, yes, but he was also reckless. And recklessness, when guided, could be turned into a tool. Beatrice's grandson, skilled with technology, set up a phone under Alvin's coffee table, disguised as a charger. All we needed was for Raquel and Javier to sit in his living room, loosened by the comfort of family, and talk they did. The recording still haunts me. Raquel's voice sharp with irritation. This has taken too long. If she had just fallen like we planned, we wouldn't be dealing with all this paperwork. A pause, then Javier's lower tone. It doesn't matter. She's gone. In a few weeks we'll have everything. We just have to be patient, like we planned. There it was, plain as day. No denials, no jokes, no plausible excuses. Just a confession, wrapped in arrogance. Beatrice squeezed my hand as we listened, her eyes shining with a fierce kind of satisfaction. That's it, she whispered. That's the nail. But for me, it wasn't satisfaction. Not yet. For me, it was sorrow heavier than any coffin. To hear my son speak so plainly of my death, as if it were just another step on his ladder to comfort, it hollowed me out. I sat there long after the recording ended, the room spinning, my chest aching. I had wanted proof, and now I had it. But proof doesn't heal. Proof doesn't bring back love once it's curdled into greed. Still, I knew what I had to do. The net was tightening. Their signatures on the bank forms, their voices on the insurance calls, their words on Alvin's tape. Piece by piece, the puzzle was complete. Now all that remained was to reveal the picture, and when I did, I swore it would not just be in a courtroom. No, they would see me, alive, breathing, standing before them. They would feel the weight of their own betrayal crashing down in the most undeniable way. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to haunt them with the truth. The night before I revealed myself, I couldn't sleep. The basement was too quiet, too heavy with the ghosts of my own thoughts. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing every creak of Beatrice's house, every tick of the old clock on the wall. My body trembled, not from fear, but from the collision of grief and fury that had been building for weeks. When dawn broke, I rose, washed my face in the tiny sink, and looked into the cracked mirror. The reflection staring back at me was not the Lydia Morales my son remembered. This woman had lines carved deeper, eyes sharper, a spirit hardened by betrayal. You're not their victim anymore, I whispered to the glass. You're their reckoning. Beatrice drove me in silence that morning. We had mapped out every detail the night before. The moment had to be right, the stage carefully set. The insurance check had just cleared into Javier's account, and Raquel, impatient as ever, had already boasted about booking a celebratory getaway to Mexico. They were ready to enjoy their blood money, and I was ready to snatch the mask from their faces. The confrontation would take place at my house, my home, the one they had already put up for sale. The realtor had scheduled an open house that afternoon, which meant Raquel and Javier would be there, overseeing things, pretending to be grieving children reluctantly letting go of their mother's belongings. The irony wasn't lost on me. We arrived early. Beatrice parked down the block, her hands trembling slightly on the wheel. Are you sure? She asked, her voice fragile. Once this starts, there's no going back. I've been gone long enough, I told her, squeezing her hand. It's time they see the ghost they buried. She stayed behind, ready to call in the detectives who had been briefed on the evidence. They were waiting nearby, eager to catch Javier and Raquel in the act of handling assets that weren't rightfully theirs. But before the law stepped in, I wanted something else. Something more personal. I wanted them to see me. I slipped into the house through the back door. The familiar creak of the floorboards greeted me, bittersweet and accusing. My house smelled different now. Raquel's perfumes, Javier's colognes, faint traces of strangers who had toured the place during showings. But underneath I could still smell me. The lavender cleaner I'd always used. The faint musk of old books on the shelves. My presence was buried, but not erased. I hid in the hallway, just out of sight, as Raquel and Javier entered through the front door. Raquel's heels clicked across my hardwood floor like the sound of nails in a coffin. Javier followed, his voice low, murmuring something about how soon they could expect offers. I clenched my fists as I listened. Raquel's tone was brisk, businesslike. We should price higher. It's a nice neighborhood. No reason to sell cheap. Not after everything we went through. Everything we went through. My lips curled bitterly. She spoke as if she'd been the one forced underground, hidden like a fugitive, as if I had burdened her. Javier sighed, weary. Let's just get it sold. I don't want to be reminded of her all the time. That was the moment. I stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. My heels pressed against the floor with a rhythm that echoed through the silent house. Raquel froze mid-sentence. Javier's shoulders stiffened. They turned together toward the hallway. And there I was, alive. Not pale and lifeless in a casket. Not a memory carved into stone. But flesh and blood, standing tall, my eyes blazing with everything they had tried to snuff out. Reminded of who, Javier? I asked, my voice steady, strong. Your mother? Raquel gasped, the color draining from her face. She staggered back, her manicured hand clutching the counter as though she might faint. No, this can't... Javier's face was a mask of disbelief, his lips trembling. You're dead. We buried you. You saw what I let you see, I cut in, stepping closer. You saw a coffin lowered into the earth, and you thought that was the end of me. But you should know better, Javier. I've always been stronger than you give me credit for. Silence smothered the room. The only sound was Raquel's ragged breathing. I moved closer still, my eyes locked on my son. I heard you. That night, I heard every word you and your wife whispered in the dark. How you wished me gone. How you planned to kill me in my sleep. I lay there, Javier, and listened to the child I carried in my womb plot my death. Javier stumbled back, his face contorting with denial. No, you misunderstood. Don't you dare lie to me. I thundered, my voice rising with decades of swallowed hurt. I have the recordings. I have your words, your signatures, your greed carved into paper and tape. The world will know what you did. Raquel let out a strangled cry, pressing her hands to her face. This isn't real. This isn't real. Oh, it's real, I said coldly, turning my gaze on her. Every smile you faked, every crocodile tear you shed, every call you made to collect my money, it's all real. And it's all documented. I could feel the storm building outside. Footsteps on the porch, the detectives closing in, Beatrice's quiet resolve holding the line. But for these few moments, it was just us. Just me, and the family who had buried me alive. Javier's voice cracked, desperation seeping through. Please, Mom. We were confused. Raquel, she made me. Raquel spun on him, eyes blazing. Don't you dare put this on me. You were the one who said she was a burden. You were the one who couldn't stand the thought of waiting for your inheritance. The venom between them was almost unbearable to watch. The bond I thought they shared was fracturing right before my eyes, splintering under the weight of truth. Enough, I said sharply. You can betray each other all you want, but you cannot escape the truth. The law is waiting outside this door, and when they hear the recordings, see the evidence, you'll have no place to run. Raquel's eyes darted to the windows, wild, panicked. Javier sagged against the wall, his head in his hands. And I stood there, calm, steady, the ghost they thought they had buried, risen to drag them into the light. Then came the knock, firm, unyielding. Police. Open up, Raquel whimpered. Javier didn't move. I turned toward the door, my voice quiet but sharp as a blade. This is the end of your story. The beginning of mine. The detectives poured in, their presence filling the room with authority and finality. Papers were served, hands were cuffed, rights were read. Raquel cried, protesting, claiming it was all a mistake. Javier's eyes met mine once, briefly, a flicker of shame, or was it hatred, passing through them before he was led away. And I stood there in my living room, alive, breathing, victorious, but inside, my heart was breaking. Because winning justice doesn't erase betrayal. And as the sirens carried my son and his wife into the night, I knew I had lost something I would never get back. The house was quiet after the sirens faded. Too quiet. I stood in the living room, staring at the dent in the couch where Javier had sat just minutes before, his head in his hands, trying to explain away the unforgivable. The echo of Raquel's cries still clung to the walls like smoke that refused to clear, and there I was, left behind once again in the silence of my own home. Beatrice came in softly, her arms wrapping around me without a word. I didn't cry, not yet. My tears were buried too deep, hidden under layers of shock and exhaustion. Instead, I just leaned into her, breathing in the smell of lavender that always clung to her sweaters, reminding me that not all bonds are built from blood. Some come from loyalty, from love freely given. "Come on," she whispered, guiding me to sit. "It's over now. Over." But as I sat there, surrounded by the hollow spaces of my home, I realized it wasn't truly over. The law could handle Raquel and Javier, yes. The courts could tally their greed and pass down a sentence. But what law could heal a mother's heart when her own child had wished her dead? What jury could restore the years I had lost believing Javier's love was unconditional? That night I lay in my bed, my real bed, not Beatrice's basement cot, and the dam finally broke. The tears came hot and relentless, soaking my pillow until I thought I might drown in them. I cried for the little boy I'd raised, for the lullabies I'd sung, for the scraped knees I'd bandaged. I cried for every night I stayed up late sewing costumes, baking birthday cakes, praying over him when he was sick. I cried for the mother I had been, and for the son I thought I had. But grief, like rain, eventually slows. And when it does, the earth is left softer, more open to what might grow next. The days that followed were strange. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers, half shocked, half enthralled by the scandal. People brought casseroles, not for Javier this time, but for me. They hugged me too tightly, their eyes darting away when they realized they didn't know what to say. I didn't blame them. What words could possibly make sense of what had happened? In court, the recordings played like daggers twisting in open air. Raquel wept theatrically, but her words, her own voice on those tapes, condemned her more deeply than any prosecutor could. Javier sat silent through most of it, his head bowed, his once proud shoulders slumped. I watched him, searching for a flicker of the boy I raised. Sometimes I thought I saw it, a twitch of his lips, a tightening in his eyes. But then it would vanish, swallowed by the man he had become. The verdict came swift. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. They would serve their time, the judge declared. Justice, on paper. But what about justice in my heart? That answer didn't come in the courtroom. It came months later, in the quiet moments, when I returned to the routines of living, watering the plants, baking bread, sitting on the porch as the sun set, watching the sky bleed colors across the horizon. Life crept back in slowly, tenderly, reminding me that survival isn't just about breathing. It's about choosing to keep going, even when love betrays you. One evening, Beatrice sat beside me on the porch, her knitting needles clicking softly. "You know," she said, "for all they tried to take from you, they didn't win. You're still here. You're still standing. That's a victory in itself." I looked at her, at the woman who had hidden me, fed me, carried my secret like it was her own. "I don't feel victorious," I admitted. "I feel hollow." She put down her knitting, taking my hand. "Hollow spaces can be filled, Lydia, with new memories, new love, new hope. Don't let their darkness define the rest of your light." Her words sank into me like seeds, and slowly I began to believe them. Time didn't erase the pain, but it dulled the sharpest edges. And in the spaces left behind, I planted new things. I joined the church choir again. I taught Sunday school. I baked pies for the community bake sale, laughing when the younger mothers asked for my recipe. I even started writing, just little notes, reflections, about everything I had survived. And one day, when I least expected it, a letter arrived from Javier. It was short, barely a page. His handwriting was shaky, unfamiliar. He didn't deny what he had done. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just wrote, "Mom, I don't expect you to ever forgive me. I don't even forgive myself. But I wanted you to know I remember everything. The songs, the nights you stayed by my bed, the sacrifices. I don't know why I let greed blind me. I don't know why I chose Raquel over you. I am sorry, truly sorry, for whatever it's worth." I read it over and over, tears staining the ink until the words blurred. Did it change anything? No. But it gave me something I didn't know I needed: acknowledgement. Proof that somewhere, buried under the man who betrayed me, my son still remembered the love we once shared. I never wrote back. I couldn't. The wound was too deep. But I kept the letter, folded carefully in my Bible. A reminder that even the worst betrayals can't erase every thread of love. Now, when I tell this story, I don't tell it as a tale of vengeance. I tell it as a tale of survival, of strength, of the way a mother's heart can shatter and still beat on. Because life doesn't end with betrayal. It bends, it bruises, but it continues. And if you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, if you've ever felt the sting of trust breaking beneath you, know this: you are not alone. You can survive it. You can rise from it. You can choose every day to keep living. That's what I did. That's what I'll keep doing. Because they tried to bury me, but I am still here, alive and unbroken.